America, bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On Tuesdays when we are lucky, Mollie Hemingway joins us with a full voice. She joins us this morning, but she's got a touch of the laryngitis. And Mollie, I'm sympathetic. I've had to go through entire 3-hour shows and 6 hours or weeks with laryngitis, and it's not fun, but thank you for persevering and joining me.
Doing my best.
You're doing very good. Mollie, I want to run a theory past you. You're young. I don't know if you have any actual memories of Reagan or HW, but maybe you do. Nevertheless, I had Mr. Ramaswamy on yesterday, and he's younger than you are. And he didn't know what the nuclear triad was. So I began talking to my wife about this, and I have a general theory that unless you've actually plunged into politics and you're born after the collapse of the Soviet Union or were young when it happened, you don't really know a lot about national security from superpower competition days because it hadn't existed since then. What do you make of my theory?
I think it might be true. I mean, I am old enough to remember much of the Cold War, the portion of the Cold War that I was under, and the threat of nuclear annihilation and how we were school children who were being prepared for possible nuclear strikes. And so we learned a lot about defense and what our strategic position was. And also, during the 80s, what Reagan was doing with even SDI was such a big thing that I don't even hear people talk about that anymore either.
No, I didn't ask Mr. Ramaswamy about that because that's a trick question. I just kind of view the triad, and I have to stop doing this. I just thought, ask him about the triad because I don't think we can afford 3 legs of the triad anymore. So my follow-up was going to be, which one do you eliminate? And we didn't get there because he didn't know what the concept was. Now, that happened to President Trump, too, but that's very different. Donald Trump was purposefully not in the weeds. Ramaswamy is a brilliant pharmaceutical big innovator, Harvard guy. And I'm just kind of surprised, but then I put it down talking to my wife about it, that it might be a generational thing.
Well, you mentioned Trump, but he was inarguably our best foreign policy president in recent memory.
Yes.
Had handled so many things without getting us into conflict. And so, it yet didn't always do great with the really, particular questions on what something was.
Oh, he didn't know who Soleimani was, but he killed him. That's what I tell people is, I asked him about Soleimani and he didn't know who it was and the Kurds and the Quds. But when it came to be crunch time and he was going to Iraq to kill Americans, Trump ordered him taken out. And go ahead.
I also think it shows how a really strong national defense policy isn't necessarily interventionist. He did take out bad guys when they needed to be taken out. It was very strong, in fact. But he didn't want to necessarily do this thing that we've been doing in recent decades, getting involved in a war without a clear strategy, without a good end game, without knowing what the result is going to be. And I think that's why it was so popular with the American people, too.
Mollie, the popular history is that President Trump ordered a strike on Assad in the early days of the Syrian genocide when he saw pictures of babies being gassed. And that then Secretary of Defense General Mattis countermanded it. You're familiar with that narrative?
Yeah, I remember the reporting.
I don't know if it's true, but let's assume it is and not treat it as a counterfactual. Wouldn't it have been better to have killed Assad? I mean, the man is a maniac. He's still a maniac, and now he's threatening Israel by allowing the transshipment of everything from Iran to Hezbollah.
In general, the U.S. has had this problem of thinking that bad guys should be taken out without realizing that they're frequently replaced by even worse guys. Our policy of regime change has just frequently not worked very well. And it's because we don't understand that sometimes the underlying conditions in a country that are producing action from a country that we don't like. It's not just like one bad guy. And getting even more deeply mired into Mideast wars when we really need to be pivoting to China would actually not be a great idea. And so while it is important to take out really bad guys like Soleimani, you don't want to deviate from your actual foreign policy focus, which should be laser focused on your national interest and what actually threatens the American people.
Well, if Trump had his wish carried out, that would have restored the red line doctrine in America that Obama erased. We'll discuss that another time. Mollie, the senior strategist I talked with on the weekend, said about Donald Trump and the Republican primary electorate, that 25% to 30% are only Trump voters, and the same number are never Trump voters. And by never Trump, I don't mean the talking heads who are paid to be anti-Trump on every appearance that they ever make. I mean the people in the Republican Party who won't vote for him. That's, to me, an almost insoluble dilemma, isn't it?
It's a huge challenge for the other candidates to figure out how they can beat Trump without alienating that third that you're talking about in these polls. And it might not be able to be done, but
might not be possible. Yep.
That's definitely something they need to work on.
Well, how do you think it's done? What ideas would you give to the 10 other people? And I think there are probably a total of 9 other serious candidates who will be on the stage and will be debating Trump. What do you suggest they do?
Well, I actually think that the thing that's really interesting about Trump is that his policies are so popular, and also his attitude toward enemies of the Republican Party is very popular. So I think emulating those really good traits, if you're not Trump, emulating those really good traits of Trump can be a really good way to win over his voters. And I noticed how Glenn Youngkin did it when he was running for office. I mean, he's not like the ideal candidate or anything like that, but he did a really good job of not being Trumpy without in any way alienating the Trump voters. And he rode that coalition to victory in Virginia.
He was also assisted by the former president in the right way, phone calls to supporters of Trump. So Trump called the 25 to 30% who were only Trumpers and helped Glenn Youngkin win. Mollie Hemingway, I want to ask you very quickly about the administrative state. Ron DeSantis has been talk about it. I think every candidate will. The administrative state has kind of surfaced as it's not the deep state, it's just the ubiquitous, ever-present government that never calls off a crisis that it benefits by. And I'm talking about it because I went on a little rant on Twitter about the drought never being over in California, though we are drowning out here. Do you think the idea of an ominous growth in the administrative state resonates with regular voters?
Well, I don't know how well they understand the term, but everyone has felt, and we were talking about Reagan, going back to Reagan, how the bureaucracy is sort of at war with the American people frequently, how they serve as judge, jury, and executioner with small businesses or with family decisions. And I think that is a salient political point that all Republicans should be moving forward. It's a really violation of our Constitution, how much power these bureaucrats have over and against the American people versus how our Constitution arranged it, where we would all get a say in how we're governed.
Now, Mollie, I want to end by the Supreme Court today will take up Joe Biden's unconstitutional attempt to forgive student loans. And I am very, very confident it will be struck down. I want them to do it in like a day so that everybody understands what he did is so fundamentally wrong. Are you as optimistic as I am? I don't
know. I hope so. And I noticed that nobody seems to think that Biden has the better of the legal arguments because of the way they're talking about it. Nobody's putting forth legal arguments that seem like they will hold sway. So you're probably right to be optimistic.
But will they act? I mean, this has got to stop. Talk about the administrative state. The executive cannot do things like this. And Joe Biden got away. It probably got him a better result in November than otherwise he would have had.
I think they were kind of open that they were doing this for political gain, even though they knew that it was not constitutional. It's not the first president to do something like this, but it's really despicable.
Despicable. Mollie, I'll let you go. MZ Hemingway on Twitter. Good luck with The Voice. It is a bane of broadcasters everywhere. There are secret sauces, which I'll tell you about a little bit later.